Started. Okay, so this is our next podcast, and today we have Emily, Claire's mum, with us. And unfortunately, Deanna can't make it today because Grace has been poorly with a UTI and some other things going on. But we think she's improving and she'll be well. And hopefully, Deanna will be back with us next weekend. But yeah, she got a bit of a fever last night, didn't she? And went a bit ill and had to go into the hospital. And yeah, it's just one of the things that we have to deal with as parents of Trisomy 13 children on quite a regular basis. But Grace is doing well. So yeah, she can't make it today for obvious reasons and has been sleepy and really wanted to talk to Emily as well. So yeah, Emily, hi.
Hello.
We were just saying, weren't we, that it's been weird because we've kind of spoke for a long time now, but never actually spoke on video.
Right. Yeah.
And it's a new sort of thing at the moment. You were saying that you're used to watching the videos.
Yep. Yeah, I watched lots of the Darcy YouTube videos, but first Darcy on Instagram, and I forget. I think I must have reached out to you first because we were pregnant with Claire at the time, and I was just like scouring Instagram for like all the different Trisomy 13 stories I could find. And yeah, Darcy was just so adorable, and like she was just doing so much better than we had kind of been led to believe like babies typically do with this. So yeah, she was a pretty important baby for our kind of whole story of this. Yeah.
Yeah, I remember us talking about it early on and that, and it's nice to hear as well, actually, because the reason I started posting about Darcy on Instagram was to kind of give parents more hope and, you know, try and change that negative view to just show that there is another side to it that people don't seem to talk about a lot professionally. So yeah, that was it's good to hear that, you know, coming back from, because I was like you when Darcy was born. We were like really sort of, oh my god, and started you know, just looking around the internet and Instagram and stuff for anything, and there wasn't not a lot of information. I mean, if you weren't part of the groups, you know, like on Facebook and that, I think a lot of the stuff you'd find is kind of medical or quite negative, isn't it? It's quite a hard thing. And I think Instagram as well, I kind of came across a lot of sort of memorial sort of posts and that, rather than you know, like our children, rather, instead of pictures like our children, I mean, where they're thriving and doing well, there's a lot of like remembrance stuff. And yeah, that's why I kind of started posting, set out to do that. And yeah, I mean, I was going to ask you actually with Claire, from the beginning, like, how did you find out? How was she diagnosed with Trisomy 13?
Yeah. So we went to our midway through pregnancy ultrasound to check on her, and we were expecting just the big reveal would be what her gender was, what her sex is.
Yeah.
And the ultrasound tech took forever, and I thought she was just being really thorough, but she kept going in and out of the room, and she was very good at like just being chatty and like casual, and so I didn't have any idea anything was wrong. And Jason and Simon, our son, were with me, and then the doctor came in, and she had like a really sweet tone of voice, and it immediately put me on edge, like, oh, doctors don't usually talk with such care right away. Yeah, and so but at that point, all they knew was that Claire's eyes well, actually, at that point, they thought she just didn't have eyeballs, which was like a really bizarre thing to hear. Like, I couldn't even like kind of understand what that meant. Um, yeah, they said we can't find your baby's eyes, and so that was at that point that was our big issue. And so we went back the next
I mean,
day.
that's a mind-blowing thing to hear in itself, isn't it? You know,
It
when you're
is, yeah,
expecting a, that's like
it
what.
felt right.
That's
It felt like a nightmare or something. It was just
yeah,
kind of like I've never heard of they can't find your eyes, and at the time I was on a pregnancy forum online, so everyone's getting these ultrasounds around the same time, and some people are having like these kind of like red flags pop up, and then a week or two later, it's nothing. It was fine. And so I was thinking like, oh, maybe this is like that, like just all these other women who post about, oh, the kidneys are a little bit too big or this or that. And so I asked the doctor, like, is this maybe just some kind of weird fake red flag, and like next time we look, like she will have eyes, like maybe for some reason they're taking longer to develop, or and the doctor was just like, no, like that's not, yeah, there's no reason that her eyes would not have developed at this
yeah,
point. So it's so something's going on. So but they were pretty reassuring because Claire was growing so well and she didn't have any other obvious abnormalities. So we went the next day for a genetic counseling meeting, and they were like, so it's probably nothing horrible like a trisomy. And I didn't even know what that meant. But since they were downplaying it, I didn't even like research that. But like since she's growing so well and this and that, it might be some kind of really random like micro deletion on some gene that corresponds to eye development. So yeah, so that or they said it could have been like an environmental factor, which then just was like heaping load of guilt and
yeah.
scariness on me, because I was like, what did I do? Like, what did I expose myself to or her to, or like, oh my gosh. So
You saying that actually, it's weird, isn't it? How straight away, because we had a similar thing when Darcy was born. Straight away they kind of say, "Oh, it can't be trisomy," or not that. They just kind of start ruling it out, don't they?
yeah,
Because we had a similar thing. I said, "Wow," you know, I was googling that, and I was like, "This really, what she's got, really looks like this trisomy 13 thing." Um, and the woman said to me, "Oh, it can't be that because that's completely incompatible with life." I was like,
right.
"Oh, okay then," you know. And then carried on researching, and it's
I'm like,
weird how they do
clearly
that.
Darcy's here alive, so like it can't be that.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And
Um,
it is kind of crazy that they some doctors have such a strong view of it that it really does damage their ability to like handle it well,
yeah,
because in your guys that's an even more extreme. Like Claire wasn't born yet, so they could somewhat say like, oh well, it's incompatible with life, because we did hear that from one doctor before she was born. But with Darcy, it's just like, clearly you're incorrect. Like currently as we speak, she's alive out of the
yeah.
womb, so like so yeah, it's just not a very good like diagnostic method, I guess.
No, and it seems like with yours, you know, they from what you're saying, it sounds like they got it straight away, but said it. No, it's not that. Started
Oh
going.
right, yeah. Yeah, yeah. And so it wasn't until we did an amniocentesis um to get some answers, because at that point it just everything just felt so bizarre, and I didn't know, like I thought like maybe I had exposed her to something. There's like certain viruses that can cause that, or like radiation, like a large amount of radiation, which just was kind of a bizarre thing to worry about. Like, when would I
Yeah,
have been exposed to like a large amount of radiation in the last 3 months? Um, so we did an amniocentesis, and they kept um, saying how like the first results come back, they just count up the chromosomes, and they were like, and your baby looks I mean, mostly normal. So like that is not really going to be where you find answers, because that would probably be normal. So then the next step is they kind of dig into the individual chromosomes and look for like these deletions, and that might be where we get some answers. So they called with the first set of results a couple weeks later. So for 2 weeks, we're thinking like, okay, so we're going to have a blind baby girl. So we research Braille and we look up like summer camps for blind kids and like all this stuff. And then made like an Amazon wish list of like tactile blind baby toys. And then 2 weeks later, we got a phone call from the genetic counselor, and she's like, so the first results are in and they're confusing. And I just like, my brain just like couldn't compute that, because I had just been so reassured of like, no, the first results will be normal amount of chromosomes. So her saying these first results are confusing was just, I couldn't understand. And then she's like, so your baby has 3 copies of chromosome number 13, which means she has trisomy 13. And I just had like a bad feeling, like, this is something they were downplaying, and I didn't research what this means. So I don't really know what you're telling me. And so I asked what the prognosis was for babies like that. And she did this like big, sad sigh over the phone and was like, those babies don't usually live very long after they're born. And sometimes they don't make it to birth. Like sometimes it's, they'll pass in the womb. And that was just like, top bad moment of our lives was hearing that news. And it was just horrible. And so then the rest of pregnancy, really, well, I guess not totally the rest of pregnancy, because we found Darcy's story during that second half. But for the next like while anyway, it was just like crushing sadness, just like very, very sad. But I really do think like, not to like embarrass you guys, but like it really, Darcy's story really was like such a turning point for us, because I had Jason, my husband Jason. I was the one who did most of the research, because that's how I could get any kind of semblance of like feeling any kind of control over what was going on. And Jason mostly just was like, I want to watch hockey. Like I want to like not research, but he was, because that's just how he had to like process. But he was always though up for like talking about it. So it wasn't like he was like, don't talk to me about your research. But so anyway, I'm the one doing all this stuff. So I pull him over one night and I'm like, look at this video. And it was Darcy, your YouTube about Darcy's birth story and how she needed a C-section.
I think that's one of the first videos, isn't it? One of the old. Was I sitting there with Darcy? Like, on the day,
Yep.
That was one of the first ones I done.
Yep. And so I've been following on Instagram for a while, and then you started doing these YouTube videos, and so then I started watching those, and I showed Jason the birth story one, because our thinking at the time had been kind of and a doctor didn't really pressure us into this, but it was just presented as like, here's what we usually do for scenarios like these, is that we don't monitor the baby during birth, because it doesn't really make a lot of sense to do a C-section if necessary, if they're going to pass shortly afterward anyway, because it's a risk for the mom then to undergo major surgery. And so we just kind of accepted that, like, oh, I guess that makes sense. And then, but then hearing that Darcy did need a C-section, like she needed that, but then now she's Darcy's 2 now, right? She's
2.5 now.
Yeah, 2.5, yeah. And at the time she wasn't, obviously she wasn't 2.5 yet, but she was just this adorable, thriving girl. And I like Jason and I both were like, oh, wait a minute. So like, what if our baby though is like this baby? Like, what if she needs a C-section, but then she like grows up a bit? Like,
And
Like,
she is like Darcy. She did turn out to be like Darcy.
yeah, right, exactly. And so that I think was a key. So Claire didn't end up needing a C-section, thankfully, but like that was kind of a first key like perspective shift and like mentality change toward it all of like,
yeah,
but what if we do like, what if we just like, if she needs that, we just do that, like what, like, and see what happens, like maybe it helps her and she gets to grow up, as opposed to like, well, there's just no point because she's not going to live very long, so like why would you do this or that. Yeah, it was like it was kind of a big turning point for us.
just gonna tell Erin. Could you just do that down there, please? You're wobbling the camera around. Thanks.
Yeah,
I'm just
Stacey, we have that
making me feel
conversation every week.
a bit seasick. It's going.
Oh, no.
But yeah, sorry. Carry on. I just needed to.
No, that's fine. Yeah, our son does that all the time. Claire's doing like video physical therapy sessions right now because the therapists aren't coming in the home for COVID reasons. And yeah, Simon just loves to like jiggle the camera just a bit, but he does it on purpose. So it's always kind of frustrating.
Yeah. I well, I was going to ask you actually. You've covered it a bit. What the doctors did say to you when you found out, and you know how. I mean, obviously you've touched on that, but how did that kind of go forwards?
Yeah.
After you know, like you said, you found my videos,
Yeah.
which is great. It's brilliant because like that's exactly why I started doing the videos, and that is to try and change people's perspective a bit about Trisomy 13, and like you say, just show that maybe their child could be a Darcy, or you know, it makes me wonder how many parents have been encouraged to end their pregnancies, and they've actually had children like Darcy, you know, and I find that really sad to think about. It's
Yeah. Yeah.
you know,
Well, even when so the 2 weeks that all we knew was that Claire would be blind, because so at the time they thought she had anophthalmia, which means no eyeballs. So I
yeah,
was just researching anophthalmia, and I found some set of statistics explaining how most parents who receive just the anophthalmia diagnosis in pregnancy, most end the pregnancy. So it's hard to know how, like the prevalence, like what genes are responsible for what, and like if it comes with other issues or not, because most of the parents end the pregnancy. And so
but
that, I
then
mean, even
just for no eyes.
just the eye part, right? Yeah.
Wow.
And so, and it wasn't some like pro-life article with like an agenda. It was just some kind of like I forget what it is now, but just some kind of scientific thing. It wasn't presenting it as like a sad thing or whatever. It was just like, oh, so the
Yeah,
facts
yeah.
are hard to know what is going on, because most people who get an anophthalmia diagnosis for their baby don't continue the pregnancy. So yeah, it is wild though, like, yeah, because the I don't know, there's just lots of babies out there who are thriving despite anophthalmia, and so it is a sad thing. But you asked about the doctors. So
Oh
yeah,
yeah,
so
yeah.
yeah.
Don't worry,
I'm
you're
getting
like
like
me. Start
distracted.
talking. I'll go on and on and on
Yeah,
about all
yeah.
this. You talk away. Just you know, it's your story, and yeah, it's just that's you know what I wanted to hear really is just how you experienced it and
Yeah,
your experiences of Trisomy 13.
yeah. Um, but yeah, so I guess the doctor, I think the first thing, so they did present terminating it, but it was never our practice, at least, was never that pushy about it, because I know some people have kind of a like a pushy time with it. Um,
Yeah, yeah,
but yeah, they never said anything too pushy, but it was like, okay, so we can do a whole bunch of tests like this week, because we were kind of close to a point where we wouldn't be allowed to end the pregnancy. So it was like, we can do a whole bunch of testing within the next couple of weeks, and get you some answers. And then if you so if you decide you want to end the pregnancy, then because of the answers we find, you'll be allowed to. And for us, that just wasn't something we were interested in, like, regardless. So we said we didn't need to do that. And then kind of the next big doctor thing was, once we got her diagnosis, we met with a neonatologist slash palliative care doc. So she does both specialties at the hospital we'd be delivering at. And she to this day, she still emails me, because I email her like videos of Claire and stuff. And she really, she was wonderful to us. I think she really was one of the few doctors we've encountered. I mean, we've encountered more as we've gone, I guess, but in the beginning, she was one of the few doctors who truly did seem to just like, what do you guys want to do? And then like went from there. As opposed to going in with her own perspective and her own ideas. And but yeah, so at that point,
it's
with
nice,
with
isn't it, when I was going to say, it's nice, isn't it, when they actually ask you, what do you want to do? How do you go forwards?
Yeah.
It's refreshing.
It really is. Yeah. But so anyway, at that point, from the info we'd been given, mostly we were very nervous about Claire like suffering. Like, we didn't want her to be born and go for a lot of interventions and like IV attempts and all this stuff, because we thought like, oh, if she's going to live 7 to 10 days, like, we don't really want that. And so we went into it with like a comfort care plan. But we said we did want an NG tube, because I saw for Darcy how she needed an NG tube. Yeah, and so we didn't want Claire to feel hunger, so we wanted her to have an NG tube. And then we also, at that point, they'd also done a fetal echocardiogram and seen she had a moderate grade VSD. And so the neonatologist was explaining how that would probably be life limiting for Claire within about a month after she was born. So that kind of really was our whole like perspective we went into birth with, was like, we want a C-section if necessary to meet her alive, and we want to do all the monitoring before she's born to make sure she's still doing okay and we don't have to like induce early. And then we want her to have an NG tube, and that's kind of it. That's kind of all we want to have done. But this neonatologist was also she was so thorough and just wanted like the facts about Claire. And so when Claire was born, she did another echocardiogram, which hearing other people's experiences now, it sounds like that's kind of unusual for a doctor to still be thorough. I don't know, even in a comfort care case, like, because I think that's one of the big things we've had frustrations with, is like, we really just we don't want Claire to be unnecessarily uncomfortable, but we also don't want to ignore what her body is doing. And if she's doing okay, then we want to help her keep doing okay. So this neonatologist did another echocardiogram when Claire was 1 day old and found that her heart had healed itself. Her heart didn't have that VSD anymore. So that really changed things too, of like, so now now there's nothing wrong with Claire that like in the next month we'll be saying goodbye to her. Like, now it's a much bigger picture of like, we don't know, like, we'll have to see what Claire does.
Did you get a bit like you realized that you'd make it to the first month, and then you were like, oh, we might make it 2 months, and then you start having these, like, to us a year was just, that would have been mind blowing. When Darcy was born, we were like, wow, a year, can you imagine if she lived a year? And now we're sitting here 2.5 years, and it's like, but yeah, that when you first realize that they'll make a month old and then 2 months old, it's such a big thing, isn't it?
It is.
I mean, with Darcy, she was 2 weeks old when she was discharged, and when we got the diagnosis, so she'd already outlived, what they say, the few days or whatever. So we were like, wow, she's already past that, and she'll make a month or something. And
Yeah.
yeah, it's it's a big thing.
Yeah.
I've that very well.
Yeah, I know when they when we went home with Claire after she was born, they had set up a 6 week 6 week old ophthalmology appointment to check on her eyes. Um
Yeah,
and I remember thinking they did that to like humor us. I was like, "Oh, that's nice that like they set up with something for when she's 6 weeks old, like but like she's not gonna get to go to an ophthalmology appointment at 6 weeks old because she won't be here at 6 weeks old." Um,
yeah,
yeah, and then but then like she was, and she was there for the 3 month follow-up appointment, like all these things that yeah, it just is like it's just like wild, like because with a healthy baby you don't think twice about that, and you're actually kind of sad when it's like, oh, they're already 6 weeks old, oh, they're already 3 months old. And then
yeah.
with these babies it's the opposite. It's like yeah, it's just such a happy surprise that they get to be
Yeah.
that old.
I mean,
um
when we left the hospital, they cancelled all her appointments, so because they'd made follow-up
oh
appointments.
gosh.
And then when they got the diagnosis, they're like, "Oh, we've cancelled the appointments. Don't worry about immunisations." And we're just put onto like an end of life thing, basically, and just
Yeah.
based on diagnosis, not on how she was, just on that title, Trisomy 13. That was it.
Yeah.
Well, I'd say, what was like the turning point for the doctors for you? Was there a noticeable sort of time when they're like, "Okay, we'll take Claire seriously"?
Oh
You know?
yeah. So yeah, so it seemed to get with this particular hospital system that we had her at, it kind of got actually worse and worse. Like it started off really well, I think. Like
Yeah,
our prenatal care and the neonatologist she had, um, it mostly was really good. I think actually the biggest frustration we had when she was born was just that our labor nurse, Claire is born and she had great, she's pink and she's crying and she just looks, she's not opening her eyes, obviously, but like other than that, she looked pretty normal. She had like an extra little pinky nub, but she looked good. And then our labor nurse asked us minutes after she was born, she asked us if we're doing a private funeral or a hospital funeral because she wanted to get that going. And
wow.
it was just like, ooh, like okay, like I was on cloud nine and suddenly now I'm back to like reality, like supposed reality of like, oh,
Yeah,
this baby's not gonna stick around very long. um so that was a blow, but mostly other than that it mostly was fine. And then it just was as Claire had a lot of trouble with her gut that first year. It just wasn't, it didn't like move things along very well. So
yeah.
she was always really underweight and always refluxing, which then would irritate her throat, and make it harder for her to breathe. She was really like positional. You had to hold her certain ways. And um, so
Yeah, it's the same with
mostly,
she's had that a lot. She's
yeah,
always had to be angled, in bed and that, and we try
yeah,
not to lay it back because she just reflux
yeah.
straight away.
It seems like that's kind of a lot of these babies. That's like a big issue, like their first while.
Yeah,
Um,
definitely, yeah. And
yes,
slow motility, like you say, that's a problem as well, isn't it? Which I think causes the reflux, doesn't it? When they're kind of all backed up.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah. Stuff's just not like moving along at like the normal rate, and then it gets, yeah, exactly, like backed up. And
Yeah,
um, so that was Claire's big problem. And so we took her to the hospital multiple times her first year because she wasn't like tolerating feeds. Um, and so but the more times we went, so in my perspective, that was like like of all the things that could be wrong with Claire, it seemed like a relatively minor one, or at least it's like we just need to help her eat. Like it's
yeah,
not like she doesn't need resuscitated, she doesn't need help with her breathing, and it's not these big scary seizures. It's just we just need to help her gut like move things along better. But the more times we went to this hospital, I think the more times they just thought they just couldn't get her diagnosis out of their heads. And so they keep seeing her every 6 weeks show up because she's not eating. And the kind of big kicker was last winter we went in for the same thing. And it had been actually after kind of a bad month where we went to an ENT, ear, nose, throat doctor for her. And he prescribed her a medicine that would slow her gut down even more, kind of an unattended side effect, but was something she couldn't handle that. And I'd asked him if he could not do that medicine, if he could do something else, and he's like, oh no, we always start with this medicine. So it slows her gut down even more, so we have to take her to the hospital. And then it just was kind of a perfect storm of like people seeing her diagnosis, and now her gut is even slower than it's ever been because of this medicine. And I just think they didn't keep up with like some pretty basic care, just like checking on her electrolytes or things like that, because it was like, oh well, here's this trisomy 13 baby again. Now her gut's even worse. And kind of like with you guys when Darcy's born, and they're like, well, it can't be trisomy 13 because this baby's alive. So like that's it was like, it's like when your theory messes up reality, like what's actually going on.
You know, when Darcy had sepsis, she was about 3 or 4 months old, and we were told she wouldn't make it through the night. And you know, suddenly Great Ormond Street Hospital stepped in and said they had to do everything they could to help, because the hospital had rang them for an opinion because we weren't agreeing to sign a DNAR, you know, do not attempt resuscitation, and because we didn't agree to them giving her morphine, because it seemed like they were just trying to sort of, you know, let her go. And obviously she, you know, made a recovery and everything once they stepped up and done that. But I know what you mean about the basic checks and that. I mean, Darcy doesn't suffer from seizures, but she has had a few in her lifetime, and that was one of the times when she did. And they were flushing her tube with saline, and obviously that, you know, having that going into her body, it threw her salt levels out because of the fluids they were giving her, and it caused seizures. And they were like, oh my god, they only realized afterwards. They're like, oh, you've been putting this in there, and I'll stop that immediately. And it's like, it just seems like sometimes, I don't think they're doing it deliberately, but it's almost like they just overlook things a bit.
Right.
I don't know. I think they do work hard, or they did work hard with her then to get her better, but there's always that thing, isn't there, where you're like, you know, if this wasn't a trisomy 13 child, you might be working a bit harder, or you know, that's how I
yeah and that we'd experienced that kind of like mentality toward Claire prior to, like, on prior hospital stays with this hospital. But I was always like able to just like have a heart-to-heart with the doctor or just like the nurse, or just kind of try and like win people over, like I always would have like a video ready on my phone of Claire like laughing and enjoying herself from recently, because I wanted them to show them like, look, she's like a happy baby, like she's participating in life and she is enjoying herself. She's not this suffering little thing that we're making her suffer, keeping her here longer. Like, it's like, please help her. Like, you feel like you have to like audition her for like, please take her seriously.
They seem to be in like a permanent happiness as well, don't they? When they're not ill, they're just happy.
They are. Yeah, they really are. Yeah. So anyway, so this one particular hospital say they weren't really keeping track of her electrolytes very well, and then she went into kind of this big, scary heart crisis, and yeah, it just was a really bad time, and so throughout the rest of that hospital stay, we kind of realized like it had gotten to a point with this health system where her specialist doctors and people truly had just kind of given up on her, basically. Like
Yeah.
they just didn't really seem uh willing to like look at what her body's doing today. What does she need today? How can we like it, and more was just like, this is what happens with trisomy 13. Like their bodies don't work. You let them die. Like this is what, I don't know. So we switched hospital systems. And so now she has a whole set of new doctors. Except there were a couple really good ones from the first system that we kept. But yeah, so now she's with a new system, new doctors, and it is just going so well. And she's thriving. She hasn't needed a sick hospital stay since January. So it's been almost a year now that she's been out of the hospital, except for she did have one surgery in August, but that was like a planned thing.
Yeah,
It
yeah.
wasn't like some kind of
That's
emergency.
brilliant. Been in the hospital or anything, and that's good news.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Relieving for you, I bet.
definitely, definitely relieving. Yeah.
I,
So
I can't.
with
Oh,
I
I
was
was
just
just
gonna
going
ask.
to. Go on, carry on,
There's
carry on.
like a lag, so I keep like interrupting you.
That's go on.
I was just gonna ask with Darcy, like what you guys did. So like with that first hospital who kind of with the saline and all of that, and they had to reach out to another hospital who told them no, you have to like intervene and help Darcy.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, what did you guys do after that? Did you switch? Have you stuck with them? Like how's it gone with doctors since then?
Well, the hospital that she went to with the sepsis, that's the hospital where she was born. So it kind of like she kind of falls under that hospital for her main, um, you know, it's like it would be her main hub, I guess you could
Yeah.
say. She's been like the pediatrician has changed since to another local hospital, but at the time her pediatrician was based at that hospital. So um, you know when they rang Great Ormond Street is like a world famous children's hospital. I don't know if you know there, because I know America's quite big, and
Yeah,
you
no,
don't.
I have heard of that one. Maybe even just from Darcy, actually, but I at least am familiar with like the fact that that's like a big hospital.
Yeah, there's some things that like I think they. I'm not sure what it was. I think they performed like the first children's heart surgery or something like that. There's some big breakthroughs that they've had there anyway in the
Yeah,
past. It's a well-known children's hospital, and it's a hospital that professionals will turn to in times when they need advice or something. And obviously they've dealt with, so at Great Ormond Street they deal with some really serious sort of things daily, like childhood cancers and things, and rare syndromes and stuff. So they've dealt with that sort of stuff a lot more than most. So obviously when they turned around, they were like, you've got to help, do what you can. I'm guessing that they would have looked at, well, Darcy's this far in life, so obviously she's doing well, and they are, so the way it works here, Darcy is under one hospital for a pediatrician and like her eye appointments and stuff, but she's under Great Ormond Street for some other stuff now as well, because of her condition and obviously how rare it is. Some parts of what she's got, like with her kidney, the bilateral duplex kidneys, um, she's been put under Great Ormond Street for that, because obviously that's more specialist in in rare children's problems, and she's also under another one in Cambridge called Addenbrooke's for her hearing and stuff. Oh, and plastics as well. So, you know, if we want to get the cleft closed, that's where she'd go. And if she has extra digits removed ever, that's who'd deal with that. But she's actually under a few different hospitals that specialise with different things. So we're not at one specific one.
Yeah.
But
And that's similar to Claire too, because we did keep her pediatrician and then some of her specialty doctors from the first hospital.
Yeah.
But then the specialists that just weren't working with her anymore, we found from another hospital system. So yeah, now she is kind of split between two.
I think the one thing we did do early on, well, after the sepsis sort of thing that happened, we did ask to change paediatricians, and that's why we changed from one hospital to the other for a paediatrician, because he kind of, I think the way he approached it, you know, with the negativity and stuff, and obviously in such intense sort of scenarios as sepsis or the birth, it kind of scarred us, especially Rebecca. So she found it hard sort of having appointments with him or talking to him. So
yeah,
you know, we asked for another paediatrician, and the one we got is she's really helpful and she's really nice, and
that's so good.
Yeah, she's very pro Darcy. So
yeah.
It's what you need.
Perfect.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, I think for parents like us, I think that's you need positive people around you, don't you? Because I mean, we have enough going on in our heads with everything we're being told and everything we see, and every little flu or cough or something, we're like, oh my god, is this what they said? You know. And it's just, yeah, you need the positivity. You need good teams around you.
Right.
And
yeah.
I was going to see that actually. How have you found being in our little community? You know, when you first found the Facebook group and everything, and obviously Instagram, and did that change things for you?
Yeah. So Instagram, especially I think was like truly perspective changing. So yeah, seeing Darcy, there were a couple other. Avonlea is an older girl now, but I found her. Actually, her mom had a blog. I first found Melissa's blog about Avonlea, but Darcy, Avonlea. There's certain babies we found on social media, or Avonlea's now just not at all a baby anymore. She's a full-grown child. But yeah, it really did change how we thought about it all, especially like I found some article back when I was just researching and hadn't thought to look on social media. There was some article about how in the children like who have trisomy 13, I think it said there were 9 in the whole world who are over the age of 5, maybe it was even younger, over the age of 2. It was this insanely small number, and I was just like, oh my gosh, like this is for real, like this is bad. If there's only 9 in the whole world who live this long, that is not good. And then suddenly you start poking around Instagram and on the Facebook group. We didn't join the Facebook group until Claire was about a month old at that point, but you're just like, wait a minute, maybe there's more than 9. Like this seems like quite a few.
I mean, it's still a small community, but there's a lot more than they'd first let you believe.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think it is so helpful to see like the other just to see like other people go through, like Darcy with sepsis, or other children and babies who had come down with like pneumonia or things, just to see like, just because you're going into a big bad scary thing doesn't necessarily mean it's the end. And so
Yeah.
just kind of to take it day by day and see what's going on and make decisions day by day, as opposed to like kind of what I think our doctors' perspectives were. We're like, oh, well, this is it. Like, this is the end, because this is what happens is they come in here with their guts not working or sepsis, and like, this is what happens. And but it's nice to see on social media, like, well, this happened with like Darcy, but then they just helped her and she got better and now she's happy again. Like, it just
Yeah.
gives you a little bit more like hope for it all.
I actually remember what I think was a bit of a turning point with you, when you became sort of quite vocal and stuff within everything. And I remember having a conversation with you, and it was like it hadn't sunk in yet that how well Claire was doing. And I remember saying to you, you know, we were talking about how trying to change that perception out there. And I actually I said to you, I was like, that's you now. People are looking at.
Yeah. And that was like a cool day, like a cool realization of like, oh my gosh, like all these babies and these parents that we've been looking up to as like, oh my gosh, what if our baby's like that? It's like,
Yeah.
oh,
Claire
she's old
is.
enough now that she's that for other people. Like,
Yeah. Yeah, I think that was a brilliant sort of moment when you sort of realised that, wow, Claire's doing really well and people are looking up to Claire. You know, it's good. And because you became, like I said, you became quite vocal then. You've sort of sharing things you know and that, and it's really cool to see. And obviously, like you're saying, you know, all of us in these communities that share what we've experienced and what we've learned, it helps people just finding us for the first time, or getting a diagnosis for the first time. And obviously, you know, we remember what it was like, just that sheer panic and fear and everything. And I always try and remember that when I see new parents posting or new parents messaging, and you know, just try and help them feel a bit better about the situation at least. But you still have to keep kind of a level of reality as well with it's hard, isn't it? You don't want to be like, oh, everything will be fine, because there's a lot of cases that aren't fine.
Right.
But
and
yeah,
even our fine is still so different than I imagined. Like baby number 2, like, I don't know, life with 2 kids, I did not think would be like this. And it's much better than when I first heard her diagnosis, but it still is like, it's just like different. But it's a good different. Like, I love our life, and I love, you know, how it's going with Claire and Simon. And
they're very rewarding children, aren't they? They're you know, once you get past the initial fear of it all, they teach you things in life that I don't think any other child could. There's something very special about Trisomy 13 children. Not that there's not that the other children aren't special, but you know.
Yeah, our other kids are going to get complexes. They're like, no, I do. I know what you mean. I think. But yeah, that was something. So seeing Darcy when we were pregnant with Claire, and I saw Darcy ate through the NG tube, and that was something. That was kind of like another like kind of perspective change. Was like, I think our love for Claire is going to be like, it's not going to be clouded by a love for other things. So like with Simon, like I loved nursing Simon. I loved that Simon could look up at me with his cute little baby face and do puppy eyes and show he loved me so much. And with Claire, it was like, so I'm not going to probably be able to nurse her. She's not going to look at me. And it is just kind of like, love Claire for Claire. Like I'm not gonna like, and with Simon, I love Simon for Simon, but then there are things Simon does in return that, feel so good. And with Claire, she has that too, but it's her own way. And so it really is kind of like, yeah, you realize like just a love that is like just for her, even if she never looks at me, if she never like says my name and runs up to me and hugs me, and like, yeah, it's just like a whole different kind of like, I don't know if pure is the right word, but just like a love unencumbered by other, things that
Yeah.
she'll do in return for me. Yeah.
I totally know what you mean there. It's hard to explain it, isn't it? But it is quite a different. I don't know. Everything as well that they do is so much more emphasised. It's
Yeah.
because with other children, you kind of go into it and going, oh, they'll crawl, they'll walk, and you don't really take it all in as much. It just happens and passes by, milestones. But with these children, you've kind of got that everything's amazing. Like, oh, they smiled, wow,
Yeah.
or oh, they can hear me, or oh, they know I'm here.
Right. Yeah.
That's
Yeah. Just these basic things they do to just show that they're enjoying themselves and that they're enjoying
yeah.
you just mean the world. Just, yeah, it just is like the best feeling.
So how my the last question I actually had that I wanted to ask you, actually saying all this, is how your views have changed. But I think you've got over most of that. But how do you feel? You've changed from what would you say to you back then to you now?
Yeah. Ooh, that's a good question. I think gosh, I think a big thing was just to take it like day by day, because I think I wanted to go into Claire's life with like, here are our lines in the sand. Like, we will not, like, before she was born, I thought like, we'll never do surgery on Claire. Like, that would
Yeah,
be kind of cruel. Like, because she doesn't, if she's not going to live very long, you're not going to, cut her open and make her recover. And like, um, and so kind of going into it with these, what I thought were like very good, ethical, like lines in the sand, things we will not do. And then you realize like, so actually, maybe a surgery to put a G tube in will make her quality of life a lot better, because she wasn't doing so well with the NG tube, and she was
yeah,
aspirating so much, and it was making her sick. And like, maybe a surgery will actually make her feel better and like thrive more, and so I think just realizing that it's important to just like take it day by day and like see like what your baby needs that day,
yeah.
as opposed to like, we'll never do this, or we'll definitely do this, we're going to do everything we can to do all of this stuff. And I think in both directions, it's like it can be too little or too much, and just see like, so today, what does she need, like, and what will make her life better.
I think a lot of the stuff you read in that, I think I learned that is you should take it as kind of, you know, um, advice rather than solid sort of what to do, because each child seems to be very different. And
Yeah.
the one thing, like with Darcy, for example, she's great with the NG tube,
Yeah.
and some children aren't. Some children need the G tube. Um, and well, for people out there who don't know, that's when it's goes directly into the stomach, doesn't it, or is it the
Mm-hmm.
intestine?
The stomach. Yeah.
Because I know there's another one that misses out. I think it's part of the intestine or something.
Yeah, I think like
But
a J tube.
J tube,
Yeah.
yeah. But yeah, for anyone who doesn't know what they are, you kind of, instead of the food going in the stomach through the NG tube, it goes straight in through a hole. Um, yeah, it's basically what it is, just a hole in the stomach, isn't it?
And there's just a little like button that you can like open and
Yeah,
close to put food or water in.
which is kind of what, I don't know, we've never, because Darcy's gotten so well with the NG tube, we've never really wanted to unnecessarily have her go through operations like that.
Definitely, yeah.
But like you say, in your scenario, it suited her a lot better than the NG tube did, and I think that's how everyone needs to do things, is just take it child by child, and obviously the parents, I think, know best. They know their children the best and what's wrong. Because I find a lot in the Trisomy 13 world, a lot of the time it's the parents leading the doctors rather than the other way round.
Yeah.
The doctors will, and then the parents will be like, no, I think it's this. And 9 times out of 10, it turned out to be that.
Right. I know. Yeah. Yeah. And that's, so yeah, I guess that's like another big thing is like kind of growing up, you just think like the doctors are the experts. And in a lot of ways they are. They have a lot of experience and knowledge, but then when you have something so rare and you've had so many medical professionals up till that point act like, oh, this is the end, when it's not the end, you start to learn like, so they're an expert about a lot of stuff, but they're not an expert about Claire, or they're not an expert about Darcy.
Yeah.
And so like, I need to be confident enough to be her expert, because I'm the one who spends all my time with her and knows her cues and knows this and that and knows her history, and so like just to have some confidence in the fact that like if you disagree, or if you're getting the sense that a doctor is way off base, like they probably are, so you should say something and be confident in that.
I think the biggest problem for them though is that Trisomy 13 is a bit of a Russian roulette, so to speak. It's a lot of things you can have set sort of stuff that will happen. I think with Trisomy 13, even though you have stuff that is usually related to it, it's a really vast sort of thing, and it could be seizures, or apneas, or heart problems, or it's such a random sort of thing that doctors just can't go, oh, this is going to happen or that's going to happen. They just don't know, do they? It affects so many sort of systems in the body, and I think to some extent actually sometimes you have things happening that don't usually happen because it's a genetic thing. Some of their systems are actually just different, and even sometimes down to the placement of organs. Sometimes they're in the wrong place, aren't they? They're just and against all medical stuff, it's like, well, that shouldn't be there. Like, oh, the heart's on the other side or something, or it's a random thing. It must be really hard for them to sort of try and work it out, because obviously they can't sit there and tell us it's going to be okay.
Right. Yeah.
It must be doctors, but I think they do need to not be so negative about it all the time. And
yeah, I know. Mostly, I really do mostly admire and appreciate the doctors that we've had, because I know it must be so hard. It's like well, I don't know, just there's any number of things where it's like, well, she shouldn't need this long to get this out of her system, this medicine, or she shouldn't need this long to recover from this respiratory virus. And it's like, I know, like from the textbook, that's probably correct, but like she apparently does. So like I don't know. We just both, us and the doctors just kind of have to follow along, and that must be hard to know, like, this person's chromosomes are making my textbook not, like, they're playing by a different set of rules than what I'm used to playing by. And so it's it's got to be, I mean, frustrating and confusing, but I think the good doctors like kind of roll with it and like, try and just have
it kind of
some patience, and
it kind takes the blueprints of, that's literally what the chromosome's doing, isn't it? It's taking the blueprint of a human and messing it up.
Yeah.
You know, so you don't quite know what's going to happen.
Exactly. Yeah.
But yeah, I think I'm going to bring the podcast to an end. It's just past an hour, so it's quite a long one, this one.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. Well,
But,
thank you so much for having me. This was great to finally like talk with you. And yeah, Jason and I both admire and appreciate you and Rebecca and little Darcy, and yeah, it's been great.
I know I want you to obviously come back and talk again, because I know Deanna would love to speak, and
I would love to speak with her.
It's a shame she's not here today.
Yeah.
But as I know, well, I think Grace is doing fine. I keep getting notifications on my phone from things, and I think I saw an Instagram one saying she's posted something, so I don't know whether it's another.
Okay, that's good.
Maybe, but I'll check that out afterwards. But yeah, I know she'd love to talk to you, and she's probably got her own set of questions that she wants to ask as well. So, you know, so yeah, so maybe if we can get you back like next weekend or something. Or...
Yeah, that would be great.
Yeah,
I would like that.
So yeah, I'll end this one here, and yeah, we'll get you back and do it again.
Good.
So anyone out there, if you want to ask any questions or anything, if you've made it this far, well done. This is a long video. If you want to ask any questions or anything, then just ask below in the comments, and we can cover them in the next one. And yeah, hi to everyone out there. I hope everyone's doing well, and yeah, I'll end this here. Let's say bye.
Bye.
Let me see how to stop this.